Hello, and welcome to part 3 of Heavy Duty Trucking's editorial webinar series on the road to zero emissions. I'm HDT editor and associate publisher Deborah Lockridge, and I'll be moderating today's discussion on zero emission trucks today and tomorrow. So let's meet our panelists. We're going to be hearing from Rick Mihalik he's Director of Emerging Technologies for North American Council for Freight Efficiency. NACV's Run on Less Electric Depot is actually in its third and final week. And Rick's going to share some of what NACV has learned on zero-emission trucks and adoption in the real world. Then we're going to have Brad Bain of Strategic Initiatives with 4Gen Logistics. He is a 2023 HDT Truck Fleet Innovator, and he's trying to make good on 4Gen Logistics' pledge to be the first North American motor carrier to own an all-zero-emission drayage fleet by 2025. And we're going to wrap up with Andrew Aaron, Vice President, Technology Advancement at PGT Trucking. I actually met Andrew last year when he accepted the Innovator Award on behalf of PGT President Greg Troyan, and since then he has been promoted to VP of Technology Advancement. He's the chairman of the Innovation Committee for the Pennsylvania-based flatbed carrier, and PGT just recently began a dedicated transportation run using a Class 8 electric truck. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, though, I want to thank our sponsors, Fleet Direct by Man and Hummel, Odyssey Battery, and Rush Truck Centers for making this special editorial webinar series possible. And we'll have a short message from Fleet Direct before we get started.
Before, guys would have to come into the parts room and pick a filter up here and then go pick another filter. And this has just been great at the standpoint of just going in and picking up a kit and have folks not wasting time. The performance of the filters have been great and a real seamless transition to what we had before and made it much better, much quicker, and much easier. And right now, I think everything is exactly as we have asked for. And I couldn't speak any more highly than I am. So yes, very, very much I would recommend it.
Okay, and in addition, note that we have downloadable resources from our other sponsors, Rush and Odyssey. You'll find that under the Ask a Question box under Event Resources. All right, so let's get started. Each of our panelists is going to make a short presentation. We're going to have some time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to type any questions into that box, that Q&A box on your screen as they occur to you. We'll try to work some of them in as we go along. If your question's for a specific panelist, let us know that. All right, so Rick, take it away.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm Rick Mihalik. I'm the Director of Emerging Technologies for NACV. NACV is an unbiased organization. Our entire purpose is to provide you information on technology improvements that can improve the efficiency of your operations. We've been around for over 13 years now. And we have a lot of information on alternative fuels and zero-emission vehicles. These are all reports available in the website. We don't charge for any of these reports. It's all free information. So I recommend that you download these slides and take a look at the resources available to you. We do demonstrations of technology in addition to reports on technology. And we're currently, as Deborah said, in the midst of Run on Less Electric Depot. It is a major event over 3 weeks where we're tracking a large number of electric vehicles of different classes in 3 different states, the provinces of British Columbia, New York State, and California. The number of groups that we worked with, we talked to over 121 different facilities in trying to down select to 10 depots that were installing significant number of electric vehicles. And we've been reporting on these daily over the last couple of weeks. There's a lot of information on our website. Just go to runonless.com to get to that. We have a number of vehicles, like I said, in operation. These are samples of the ones that are operating and the different fleets that have joined in. In addition to that, this focuses on depots. And so we have a number of different charging mechanisms that are in place. We have chargers at the low end of 19 kilowatts, all the way up to 750 kilowatts. And some of these are permanently installed, and we have one installation where they're using temporary chargers. It turns out that you don't need to wait for the permanent installations. You can get going with your electric trucks through the use of temporary interim solutions. So we've got a lot of information in work. We'll be reporting over the next year, but as a starting point, we've reported that small depots are ready to electrify now. If you're looking at 5 to 10 vehicles, you can go ahead and do that now without any issues. Large depots also being demonstrated. We have one depot, Schneider, in South El Monte, that has 92 heavy-duty tractors being charged. They replaced 80 diesel units. It's a pretty significant installation. And several of the other installations that we're working with have large numbers of vehicles going in. There are huge improvements since we did this in 2021, and you just have to go to our website to look through a lot of the information there. Cost and weight reductions are still needed on the electric vehicle side. That's true with diesels as well, but that's just we're getting into that mode where you have to continuously improve the products, and you're going to see that coming with newer and newer iterations of vehicles as they come out over the next few years. Range extension is feasible, so you're not limited to the stated one charge range. We're finding that in one case with the Tesla vehicles in Sacramento, they were able to get over 800 miles out of a vehicle in a 24-hour period. We have ranges over 400 miles on a regular basis, and ranges of 300 miles are not really an issue. Long lead is still getting the power into these installations, so that's something that the utilities are still having to work with. And then there's just an amazing amount of diversity and passion of the people involved with this. We interviewed 122 people at these 10 different sites, and just the energy, you can see this on our videos. Let me talk to you a little bit about what's feasible in the marketplace today. We think terminal tractors, box trucks, vans and step vans, and short and medium regional haul are all easy fits today for electric vehicles. They all share the same properties. Basically, we're talking about a future where there are multiple solutions in play. We call it the messy middle, and it's because these vehicles are optimized for different segments of the marketplace, with battery electric vehicles being better suited for the lower ranges and lower weights. And then you're talking about alternatives for the higher ranges and higher weights. And just to talk about the range situation, if you look at Texas, a lot of the cities are hundreds of miles apart, and that really points to distances that require hydrogen fuel cells or hydrogen ICE vehicles, natural gas, renewable diesel type solutions. If you look at the New England area, you have a lot more opportunity to go to shorter range vehicles because the cities are just closer together. And then if you look into the Northwest, you see a combination of shorter ranges and longer ranges are needed to get all of the major sites. So you're going to see multiple solutions. You're going to see right now we're right at the starting point of adopting zero-emission vehicles. You're going to see Somewhere by 2040, perhaps half of the population of production vehicles coming offline are going to be zero emission, and they're going to be replacing diesels over that period of time. And then somewhere in the far future, there's going to be very few diesels and a lot of zero emission vehicles. And where these vehicles are laid out, you can look at this eye chart on your own time, but they're all over the United States. And you need to look to Clean Cities organizations to really see where the big opportunities are. There are a lot of decision factors involved with this. We have a graphic for that you can look through at your own time. And as I said, there are multiple solutions available for this, and we recommend starting with a baseline of a battery electric vehicle. And if that's not working for you, you start migrating into these other solutions. Thank you very much. This is my contact information, and I'll pass you off now.
All right, great. Thanks, Rick. So we got a question that came in, and I hear this question a lot about basically paying. It says, are these zero-emission trucks still at demonstration only, or are they commercial where users and big businesses can, and are they ready to buy with their own finances without public funds?
There are over 30 manufacturers making production vehicles today. A lot of the vehicles you've seen over the last 5 years have been prototypes and what they call early production vehicles. In the One on Less event, the majority of those vehicles are actually production vehicles off production lines. There are a handful of what are called pre-production vehicles that are production intent, but the production lines aren't fully up and operating yet. And yes, they can be ordered now. Lead times vary depending on the manufacturer. Some of them are on the order of months. Others are longer than that. And it's just a matter of working through the details. The bigger issue, again, is getting your power into your facility. And that can be anywhere from 6 months to 2 or 3 years, depending on how significant the installation is.
All right, great. Yeah, and I know we've been hearing a lot about some difficulties in getting the trucks. It seems to be a backlog. All right, so let's go on, and Brad Bain. Brad can talk, I'm sure, about some delays in getting the trucks he's ordered. Brad, take it away.
All right, thanks, Deborah. First off, I'd just like to thank Deborah and HDT for the opportunity to speak today. I can speak a lot to what we were just talking about. I want to talk a little bit about our journey over the last 3 years, kind of where we started and where we're at now. But once again, I'm Brad Bain. I'm VP of Strategic Initiatives. And 4Gen Logistics is our California entity, and we are primarily drayage out of the ports of Long Beach and LA. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about our journey over the last 3 years, kind of the why we chose this path, kind of go into a little bit about our vehicle selection, how we went about our infrastructure, and just obstacles and lessons learned, which are happening every single day in the world of battery electric vehicles. Kind of first and foremost, we were kind of driven by the California regulations. Being a California-based company, as many of you may or may not know, CARB kind of drives everything that's going on in zero emissions right now in the state of California, the California Air Resources Board. And they've put together some pretty lofty objectives for zero emission vehicles, and it's even a little more aggressive for the trucks going in and out of the ports of LA and Long Beach. As of January 1st, 2024, no longer will you be able to register anything in the port registries other than zero-emission vehicles. The current diesels that are going in or CNGs that are going in all have certain periods that they'll allow to continue entering the ports. I believe it's a 10 or 15 year life, and then 800,000 miles. And once you hit those objectives, you have to register zero emission only vehicles. So needless to say, this has been coming for years. We felt the need to kind of jump on things early. Our owner, David Duncan, is all about kind of being an early adopter and on that cutting edge. So we started our journey about 3 years ago, and we've been running some BYD battery electric vehicles in our port operations for almost 3 years now with really good success. And then we've just kind of decided to up our game. As Deborah mentioned before, we are committed to be completely zero emissions by the end of 2025 in our California operations. And lastly, we saw this as an opportunity. In the state of California, they're very clean driven, reducing emissions, and a lot of our customers are asking for that as well. So we see this as an opportunity to provide that service for our customers and kind of, once again, stay out on the leading edge of the new technology. So get a little bit into our selection process as far as the trucks go. We looked at a lot of different things related to past OEM relationships, what was currently available in the BEV segment from the OEMs. We've had a long-standing relationship with Kenworth Freightliner on the diesel side, and as we went through and started to do our due diligence, Kenworth definitely played a factor in that. And then we formed a new relationship with Volvo with their VNR product. Volvo's, to me, is kind of ahead of the game as far as the electrics go. They've been doing this for a while in Europe, and they have really put together a nice product that's available on the market today, and we've placed a pretty substantial order that's being worked here currently. We've also placed an order for 20 of the Kenworth Daycab T680Es, of which we have 7 on the ground that we're running today. We have 1 Volvo in the works, and we're still running our 3 BYDs that we've had for the past few years. So as part of that, we did a lot of testing. We went to manufacturer sites, were able to get out on their test track and test their vehicles. And probably one of the most important pieces that we did is we got our drivers involved in this process early on. Our guys that moved into our BYD trucks 3 years ago have never came out. Once they got in, they just absolutely loved everything about the electric vehicle. So we made it a point as we looked to expand to over 60 trucks initially on the BEV fleet that we wanted our drivers to go and test drive these vehicles, get them involved, get their feedback, what they liked and what they didn't like. And ultimately, the drivers led us down the Volvo VNR path and then the Kenworth T680 path based upon a lot of their feedback. Just for information only, price of these Class 8 heavy-duty trucks are going to be anywhere from $375,000 to $450,000 before taxes. So that was definitely a factor for us as we looked at building these relationships. Another key thing for us was just the range and the weight. Battery electric vehicles are heavy, so how can we offset that as much as possible? You're looking at vehicle weights of anywhere from 21,000 to 29,000 pounds on the day cabs. And you're looking at ranges available on the market today from 120 miles for like a lower 4 battery pack unit to 350 miles on some of your 6 battery pack units. Needless to say, for us, none of this makes financial sense without the availability of some incentives and grants, of which we definitely take advantage of that. We have our HVIP money for drayage trucks in the state of California. That's $150,000 right off the price of the truck, and then there's multiple grant avenues that we've went after to help get that truck in a more reasonable price range, similar to what we're paying for our diesel day cabs now. And then another big piece of that is just what's the maintenance look like on the BEVs. It's a huge unknown. We don't have a whole lot of miles on all of our new trucks, but I can tell you with our BYDs and our Volvo that we've been running for about 9 months, maintenance has been pretty minimal. So we're happy with what we're seeing on a very small scale right now, and we're hoping that'll translate as we get into 60 or 70 units on the road here in the next 6 months. Another big piece for us was just the charging infrastructure. I guess the one thing I want to stress, and I'll stress it again in lessons learned, this is the first part of what you should be doing if you're looking to go to battery electric vehicles. It is very time consuming. It's a very long process. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and that's changing every day. So for our process, we knew when we went out initially and we made this commitment, we have two locations. We have an Inland Empire location in Rialto that's kind of our main hub to service our customers in the IE. And then we also have a facility in the port infrastructure in Long Beach. So for our first phase of charging, we're putting in 350 kilowatt chargers in our Long Beach location and 14 in our Rialto location, and eventually those numbers will double when we get through phase 2. As we were kind of going back and forth, we're like, what equipment is available out there? What's the biggest, the baddest, fastest charging equipment that was there at the time when we made our selection over 18 months ago was Electrify America. So we have partnered with Electrify America, and all of our stations will be that 350 kilowatt high-speed charging. Right now I don't believe any trucks that can accept 350 kilowatts, but you got your Kenworths, I believe, that are around 135 kilowatt charging speed, and your Volvos are over 200 kilowatts charging speed. So we'd be looking at anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hour charge times with these 350 kilowatt chargers for the trucks that we have decided to go with. The important piece, I guess, for us was just sites. Luckily, we had 2 sites that we already had long-term leases on and worked well for us. The other big piece of that is just the power that was available in the area, and it just worked out. Between both sites, we need over 9 megawatts of power, and just to give you guys an idea, that's probably about a town the size of 30,000 homes worth of power that we need just for our 2 sites alone. So very substantial power requirement. And I guess the big thing that I'll kind of show as we kind of move along is be prepared. I think that's the one thing that caught us a little off guard. We knew infrastructure was going to be a big thing, but the pictures you're seeing now are our site in Rialto. We're only putting in 14 initial chargers. It's a pretty extensive construction that goes on. It's going to take up a big piece of your yard, so I just wanted to throw that out there today, that infrastructure will definitely play a big piece and take up some of your yard while that construction's going on. I could sit and probably talk for 5 or 6 seminars on obstacles and lessons learned over the last 3 years for our process. Just some important things to kind of focus on is your price. Get out and really look at that and know that for this to work and be from an economic standpoint with the price of the trucks and the price of the infrastructures, is you got to take advantage of the incentives and the grants that are out there available for you. Some of the things we've been up against, it's just a new technology, both on the OEM side with the trucks and the charging infrastructure side. So we've faced lengthy delays on both the vehicle side and the charging side. We had planned to be up and operational 6 months ago with 60 units and 45 charging stations. At this point, we're close to having 14 charging stations in the next 60 days, and we have 8 trucks. And we're looking now at probably early next year before we have the other charging infrastructure done and the rest of our trucks delivered. They've been facing some numerous recalls, which is kind of be expected, but they're working through those things. Utilities, once again, most important piece right here. If you're considering this path, you need to get a fairly solid plan together of what it's going to look like for the number of trucks you want, the locations you plan to put your charging, what your duty cycles are going to look like, and just have that really basic plan together and approach your utilities. Say, this is what we're thinking about doing. Let them do a little bit of a site analysis to understand, is the power there at the site you'd like to do it based upon your needs. In many cases, people are finding out it's not, and that's going to, once again, we're 3 years into this, and I still don't have a live site for charging. So just know the process is going to be lengthy, and the bigger the project, the longer it's going to take, as Rick mentioned before. So that's a big thing. But start with utilities, have those conversations well before you even get into the equipment piece of it. Know that, for us and our model and how we run our trucks, we knew going into this is not a one-for-one ICE versus BEV transition. We're kind of taking a look to think that we're going to need 3 trucks for every 2 drivers. We run a 2-shift operation, so it works for us where the first shift truck can come in and charge, or we can take advantage of opportunity charging throughout our shift. Another thing to worry about, your drivers are going to feel this, is that range anxiety. That's why it was important for us to get the drivers involved early on so they can get a feel for that and how we're going to manage that range anxiety. But it's going to be out there. It's part of going to a battery electric vehicle. And a huge piece for us is how to manage your BEV fleet. It's bigger than the charger management side. It's bigger than just what's going on with your truck throughout the day, or it's bigger than where's your truck located. So we actually partnered with a company called FlipTurn about 9 months ago and helped them kind of develop the software that's on the market today. And it's going to give us a one-stop shop to manage our whole fleet, from the telematics side to what's our truck doing, what's our state of charge on our truck, to all of our charger management and reporting from the charger management side. The cost of electricity is a big thing, so FlipTurn is going to allow us to see real-time data to what our electricity usage looks like, our charges, how efficient we're being. So just know that's a big piece of it as you go into a BEV fleet if you choose to go down that path. And then lastly, I'll just say start now. It is, like I said, it's a long journey, especially with size. So if you're looking to do 10, 15, 20, 50 battery electric vehicles in the next few years, the time to start is right now. I appreciate the time.
All right, thanks, Brad. Question came in about your Port of Long Beach operations. Is it are those vehicles operating 24/7, and is the charging fast enough for those turnarounds?
Once again, it's kind of all based upon your operation. We run a 2-shift operation, so I would consider us almost 24/7, but we're Monday through Friday. We do occasionally do some stuff on Saturday and Sunday, but with our operation, we have enough time within our shifts, or we'll have enough trucks available to where a day shift guy will come in, finish his shift, and a nighttime person might be slip seating with that person. But if there's not enough in-between time with the trucks to charge, they'll be able to hop into another unit that we have available. We're factoring that in to have extra trucks. And once again, we haven't really done it at scale yet, so we have some great plans on how we think it's going to work. But until we get 60 vehicles going, it'll be a struggle. And the other thing about the ports is we're only doing 40 miles a shift, because we're literally in and out of the ports to local yards. So in theory, even our Kenworth trucks, which are 4 battery packs, could do 2 shifts without a charge. So we have some things built in. And then the other thing I didn't touch on is, because I know this is going to come up, is we have some redundancy built in. We're doing very large battery backups at both of our facilities in case we have to deal with any brownouts or other power issues within the state of California.
Yes, and that is always that's something that frequently comes up. So, Brad, you've been delayed on getting actually your facilities in. How are you currently charging the ones you have?
We have we're really only using the trucks that we have in our port operations, just in and out of the ports to our local yards. And one of our yards has allowed us to put up some temporary. We have 6 temporary. They're high-speed DC chargers, but they're only 30 kilowatt chargers. But it works for us because, once again, we're only using that truck on one shift. So it'll do its 12-hour duty cycle, and then it has time to come back for 12 hours and charge before the next shift. So we've been making do with those smaller chargers for now with the amount of vehicles we have.
All right, great. All right, let's move on to Andrew. Andrew Aaron, for PGT and tell us about what you've been doing.
Thanks, Deborah, and thanks to everyone for joining and giving me an opportunity to talk for a little bit about our journey at PGT with zero tractors. Very happy to follow Brad as well, because I think there's a lot of interesting similarities and contrasts in our two experiences. So Brad has perhaps the disadvantage and also advantage of operating in California. PGT Trucking is a large, at least in my mind, large, around 1,000 truck, primarily flatbed trucking fleet based out of the industrial Midwest. I'm in Pittsburgh. A little bit about us: we'll haul pretty much anything you can safely, hopefully profitably haul on an open deck. Primarily, we started with steel coils, but we've diversified into all kinds of stuff, building products. We even haul some rocket ships. So in that way, it's a pretty fun company to work for. Brad, I also want to start with this question of why, because it's not easy, and it's certainly a challenge to try to lead in this space. So I think why is a good question. It started with us, with customers, and Brad mentioned this as well, right? Like, while I don't have CARB pushing us in our primary areas of operation geographically, we do have customers who have made public-facing commitments about sustainability. Again, coming up in the steel industry as PGT has, a lot of our customers aren't the cleanest, at least historically, in terms of their own emissions, right? So they try to get a handle on that. They're starting to look at Scope 3. Scope 3, from an emissions perspective, is a trucking company relative to, let's say, a shipper, right? We're not the emissions they directly produce, but associated with the transportation of their products to market. And so we started to hear over the course of the last 5 years or so, increasingly from our customers, an interest in some amount of emission reduction programs. In response to that, we launched a program that we call Future Flatbed, which seeks to try to lead in this space and maybe give us somewhat of a competitive advantage in the future. And that started with us with a partnership with Nikola, the electric truck maker. We've been working with them for 5 years now. And my involvement in this just started with talking to customers. So I put together a quick deck. Actually, this next slide is a slide from my deck. And what I did was I just talked to our customers. PGT placed a letter of intent to order 100 hydrogen fuel cell electric trucks from Nikola a couple of years ago. And so what I did is I just started talking to our top 15 customers and said, hey, this is what we're doing. I didn't have an ask. I didn't ask for their support. I didn't ask for their willingness to pay green premium. I just said, hey, you, Mr. Customer, are important to PGT, and we hope PGT is important to you, and this is something we're doing you might know. And I was leading the presentation, and Greg Ryan, who Deborah mentioned at the beginning of this, my boss, the president, he's sitting silently in the room, and presentation ends, and we jump off the Zoom call, and I turned to him. I'm like, I don't know, Greg, I couldn't get a feel for the room. What'd you think? And I'm presenting to logistics, like a president of logistics kind of person, right? And, he says to me what ended up being right. He said, you may not, sell this today, but what's going to happen one day is this. That guy's going to get called into a board meeting one day. Some member of the board's going to ask him, hey, what are you guys doing about Scope 3 emissions? And the goal here is for them to think of PGT Trucking. And lo and behold, that's turned out to be exactly what. So I mentioned that this started because we placed an order for 100 hydrogen fuel cell trucks. Hydrogen is not ready for the market in the Midwest. We can get into that later. But this whole time I was talking, hey, maybe 2024, 2025. But over the course of the last 12 months, I've increasingly been getting interest from these people that I made presentations to. And just as Greg predicted, they called me back and they said, hey, can you get us one of those zero-emission trucks you talked about, zero-tailpipe emission trucks? And so we somewhat pivoted and said, well, we can't get hydrogen yet. We can't get fuel in an economic cost that makes any kind of sense where we're talking about. But let's talk a little bit more about how you want to use these trucks. And what we figured out is that a battery electric truck is a use case that works for some of our customers. And while we don't do drayage, a lot of our customers do have short haul lanes that are somewhat repeatable. So what you're looking at here, this slide is our first truck. I actually took this picture myself. This was in December in Kentucky, and this was our first run. In those crates are the machinery that's going to make a steel mill that a large publicly traded firm has opened up in Kentucky recently. And we hauled loads from a staging warehouse about 25 miles away to the actual facility and did a few of these as a proof of concept. While we had support at this customer from the very senior leadership side, a lot of the decision makers at this particular plant were, I would say, cynical on the ability of this truck to operate. This was in December, as I mentioned. It was 19 degrees that day, and the truck performed beautifully. I actually had 2 drivers there. I was very anxious that we'd have a problem, so I brought 2 of them down in case one of them got sick. And these drivers loved the truck. I think we anticipated that maybe this truck would be interesting to the 25-year-old drivers out in the world. But I'd say we were wrong in that sense that we thought the old, grizzled 60-year-old guys wouldn't like them. I brought down 2 million-mile safe drivers because I didn't want to crash my expensive truck. And one of these guys who's 60 years old and has talked to me privately about his retirement kind of timeline said this truck might keep it at PGT for another couple of years because way less wear and tear on his body. There's no transmission, there's no vibration from the diesel engine, and it's interesting. And so the drivers really liked them. They accelerate maybe even too fast. So all in all, it was a success. This customer signed on with us, and I'll talk a little bit about our model because it's pretty different from what Brad's doing. So again, we don't have a return to base property owned by PGT adjacent to our customer's pickup. That would be great, and it would allow me to pitch putting in a charging facility at a terminal. It doesn't work for us in Kentucky, Arkansas, Pittsburgh, where we happen to be operating these trucks. So what I actually talked my customer into doing is installing charging at their facility using their electricity at their cost. They're not paying me fuel surcharge, but the math over a long enough time span works out for the customers to pay for the charger. At least that's what I sold, and seems to be working that way so far. So that's how we've operated this truck, and that's how this particular customer signed on for one. They're building a multi-million-dollar charging facility in Arkansas. We've got a temporary charger hooked up there now to service this truck, and it's making short-haul freight for them. So this is a steel company, and they basically have to haul things to a rail spur 60 miles away. That's being serviced by that truck. Shortly thereafter, a competing company called us, and he said, hey, I remember you guys gave us this talk, and we didn't do anything, but we saw in the news that one of our competitors is doing this, and we'd like to do that too. So this is inside of one of their steel mills, and it's coil being put onto there, right? So similar kind of application where steel coils have to go through multiple steps in their process. A hot rolled coil and something that eventually gets to be made into a car or a refrigerator, and we haul these coils oftentimes multiple times throughout those steps. And those kind of short haul operations turned out to work pretty well for a battery truck. And this is the truck, and this one's actually in Pittsburgh, or have been used in Pittsburgh, and this is the one we've gotten the most miles out of because we've got the chargers up and running. I'll talk briefly about chargers. I said I got customer facilities, and that's what you're looking at. So one on the left was our temporary setup in Kentucky for our trial run. You can see it was not very sophisticated, the pallet it's sitting on. I only point that out to say that, you can achieve it if you're willing to work with some folks and find a way to make it work. That's not a permanent installation, but it worked fine for us. On the right, in contrast, is a permanent installation next to that, that wall there is a customer facility feeding off their juice, and that's where the truck parks, plugs in every night. We haven't played around with slip seating, but we are trying to find ways to maximize the use. Pretty early into this phase. This is some results on the truck, which we put into service about 2 months ago, beginning of August. A little over 100 loads. We've had no problem thus far with any kind of unplanned maintenance. We are dealing with a recall right now. The public and in the news, for what it's worth, kind of expect these types of things to be happening. We didn't assume everything was going to be smooth sailing. So that is out there, and everyone ought to know about it if you don't. We are right now operating functionally a 1-to-1 charge-to-truck ratio, which makes the economics challenging, but we've encouraged, and our customers have found this to be agreeable, to put a charger that can charge 2 trucks at once on the facilities, and we've got the choose to do that. Again, the advantage of locating them at a steel mill is these places have electricity at a far greater extent that you might have in a business park or at a truck terminal that's built for diesel trucks. So these guys have the juice to spare. One other interesting lesson we learned that I do want to talk about, again, because we're not running these things 24/7, and we didn't anticipate exactly how the charging would behave, let's say, at 3. So imagine you're running like a typical daylight shift. You run, you use most of the battery, everything goes great. Maybe you opportunity charge in the middle of the day, as Brad mentioned, and we've done some of that too to extend the range. And then at the end of the day, you plug your truck in. It only takes a couple hours to charge, so 2, 3, 4 hours. You're fully charged. Let's say it's 1, 2 a.m. What happens next isn't something that it wasn't a problem that we thought about until we ran into it. And the answer there, at least with our configuration, is that the truck stops charging, and then it starts actually draining its battery. It's somewhat analogous to a diesel truck idling. These trucks often have some amount of residual power drain. We found that is especially impactful in the winter. We discovered that in Kentucky. So if you are going down this path, I would highly encourage you to work closely with the charging and the truck OEM to figure out what kind of software they can install to have that behavior be managed. So we're working with a charger manufacturer that we've ended up with a relationship with to change the software coding to say, hey, once you reach 100%, maybe let it trickle down to a threshold, and when it hits that floor, let's charge it back up. Because I'm not staffing these facilities 24/7 to have someone go under the truck and plug it back in. So very much a lesson learned, something we're trying to work through. A couple other things I just wanted to talk about. I used to work in risk and insurance. Okay, so physical damage insurance is not a nothing to consider. Like, it's significant. We retain a lot of risk at PGT. Philosophy is somewhat to bet on ourselves. And when these trucks cost more than 2x what a PL or an international costs, that's an issue. So we had to, rely and leverage our relationships with our insurance companies to try to make this able us to be able to handle that amount of risk. But eyes wide open, we are, if we wreck one of these trucks, we're going to be out more money than we'd like to be. So in that scenario, we've got a very different screening process for hiring and training drivers that are going to end up driving one of these. It's not, as Brad mentioned, it's not a one-for-one swap in a diesel truck and manage closely, and I couldn't agree more, right? Like, I can't just imagine I'm going to, retire my 2017 Internationals and just buy a couple of battery trucks to swap in there. It's not going to work that way. So for us, this is a truck that is only given, or access to it is only given to especially trained drivers who have demonstrated years of safe driving behavior, because if we go bumping these things into yellow baller poles, it's going to get bad fast. Financing is worth mentioning, and I saw a question in the chat about, is there anyone willing to pay for these trucks basically at retail price without the really generous California incentives, which I'm jealous because I can't get them in Pennsylvania. The answer is me. The exception of the Inflation Reduction Act gets us something like a $40,000 tax credit. Beyond that, we're basically paying sticker price for these things. There is some publicly available funding. A lot of it has come from the Volkswagen settlement. But those are, at small scale, you have to apply for them. I have applied for some. We haven't gotten it yet. And we've bought some of these trucks without that. So we've had to try to figure out a way to make the math work with basically at sticker price, and that's challenging. So part of the way we've tried to square that is with I mentioned somewhat on the charging end of things. The running cost of these trucks we're projecting to be pretty low relative to a diesel truck. Our experience, at least at PGT, is that the emissions reduction equipment that is on all trucks these days, that's the number one reason our trucks break down. The DEF filters, the whole after treatment system ends up being expensive. So I've got a 12-year-old kid who's in pre-algebra, and I think of those like graph, and we probably all had to look at with the two different curves, right? One starts at a low point, but then has a high curve. My argument is that's kind of the cost of operating a diesel truck. Early results lead us hopeful that while battery electric trucks are going to be very expensive, they're going to start higher on that graph. They're going to have a lower slope, and there's going to be an intersection point at which the total cost of ownership may well be lower for the battery electric truck. Now, what those slopes are, very debatable, and it's far too early for us to say, but we're optimistic and somewhat betting on we're going to find that those two lines cross, and that the battery truck in the long run is going to be economically viable. That if the government were to pass some incentives, I wouldn't turn them down. I mentioned on finance. Oh yeah, one other thing on financing it, and I'll turn it back over to Deborah, is that there's a real challenge because we couldn't find somebody who was very confident about the residual value of these trucks. Like we all know how trucks depreciate, diesel trucks depreciate, but we basically find things assuming they're not going to have residual value after 5 years. So we did have to assume more of the risk there, but by shopping it and leaning on some relationships, we were able to get a pretty competitive financing package. So the financing of it took a little bit of work from our CFO, but it really wasn't as bad as thought it was going to be. Nowhere near the kind of lift that getting the insurance more tolerable would be. On the maintenance side, we've worked this out with our maintenance vendors. We're basically doing maintenance through the dealers, and we haven't had to call on them yet, so I couldn't tell you. I'm hopeful it's going to work, but good news is I haven't had to call on Cleveland Brothers yet to say, come fix the trucks. So that's all I have for today.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Okay, let's see if we can get to some of these questions. Rick, this might be a good one for you about batteries. When you're charging the batteries multiple times daily, how does that affect the batteries? And also, what are we thinking about battery longevity and replacement as they age, cost forecasts in NACV's research? Are those any thoughts on what you all have found?
Yeah, the research on truck batteries is still fairly new, right? So there's only a few thousand vehicles out there at present, but there are a lot of autos that have been put out in the world. And the data over the last decade shows that a properly designed battery, properly managed in charging, really is not significantly impacted by high rate charging events. There's a good deal of data on Teslas out there that go over a decade, and the degradation is not significantly different between high rate charging vehicles and ones that are low rate. That said, it's still very early in the process, and clearly that's going to be a focus of anyone designing these vehicles, is to make sure that the battery packs will go the distance. Minimum warranty periods are going to be 8 to 10 years on these batteries.
Okay, thanks. Question, and this is probably for Brad and Andrew, about choosing those trucks. Brad, I mean, you both kind of talked about the procedure of trying to choose what EVs you wanted to go with. Any particular things that just really stood out that were really important for you? Brad?
Yeah, I mean, our big fleet will be Kenworth and Volvo. Once again, we had a long-standing relationship with Kenworth, so that definitely played a part in our decision early on to go with Kenworth. But also, we didn't just not look at the price and other things that go with it, so we liked the price, and our drivers enjoyed driving them when they got the chance to do it. The big thing for us was we had no previous relationship with Volvo on the diesel side, so our drivers really initiated us to go down the path with Volvo just based upon their feedback. It was their favorite truck out of all of them, and we've driven the Nikola, the BYD, the Freightliner, the Volvo, the Kenworth, most of the major OEMs. They had a chance to drive it, and they just really, to every single driver we took, the Volvo was the favorite. They just loved the vision from the cab, the cockpit setup, just the smoothness of the truck. And that's kind of what started our relationship with Volvo. And of course, we went down the price of path. And I also believe they have a great maintenance package that comes with it. And they're probably kind of leading the OEMs right now as it relates to the maintenance and qualified technician side. So that was a big piece of us heading with the Volvos.
So, Andrew, what about you? What led you all to go with the Nikola?
So it started for us kind of the opposite direction. So former president of Nikola, Mark Russell, used to be a president at one of our customers, Worthington Steel. So our relationship started with Mark Russell calling my boss saying, hey, we're trying to build an electric truck or fuel cell truck, but I used to be a president of a steel company. I don't know all that much about trucking. Can you help us? So we were on an early advisory board, and we've been talking with them at an increasing level since then. We did actually look very closely at the Volvo, and I still might pull the trigger on some of those. We ended up going with Nikola because of the longer range. We found them to be pretty good, pretty accurate in the projected range. But I would encourage everyone to look at what the use case is really closely, because again, it's not easy and it's not a one-for-one. So weight and range and charge time are the key factors in that math, in my view. Trucks are heavy, so you got to figure out what of my freight is going to be light enough and in what kind of range to make sense. And that's ultimately why we ended up pulling the trigger on the 2 battery trucks, because we could find a good use case that fit within the Nikola's kind of value proposition.
So range, obviously, big consideration. Rick, in the data coming off the trucks and the run armless electric, you mentioned that fleets are tending to get longer range than perhaps they had thought. How are they achieving that?
Yeah, so several of the fleets have figured out how to maximize use of the trucks by having mid-route charging. So, there's this kind of thought that you only charge these things once a day and then you run them, and that's not really how you optimize use. You can get half an hour of charging or an hour of charging at lunch, and that's sufficient to extend the range of the vehicle considerably. The other thing that these trucks have regenerative braking, which means as they're slowing down, they're putting energy back into the batteries. And depending on the duty cycle, that can extend the range significantly if you're operating in high traffic conditions. So there's just a number of ways that they're finding out that they can extend the range beyond the manufacturer's specification.
So hydrogen. Andrew mentioned that they initially, were looking at the fuel cell Nikolas, but haven't been able to, I guess, source the hydrogen. Can we talk maybe a little bit about how do you guys look at hydrogen as far as where we are with it? Is it, as most people seem to think that batteries are probably not going to be good for longer ranges. Any thoughts there, Rick?
Yeah, hydrogen fuel is hard to find right now for putting in vehicles, but we make a lot of hydrogen and use a lot of hydrogen in the U.S. today for making fertilizers, for making diesel. They use a lot of hydrogen in Houston for diesel manufacturing. So producing it is something that's pretty well understood. It's just rolling out the delivery of it for use in vehicles. We're just getting to the point where there's a lot of money going into that side of it. So the Department of Energy has we'll be awarding about $7 billion in funding to help roll out hydrogen hubs to anywhere from 6 to maybe 10 different sites in the United States. As I said, we're just very early in that process. So watch that space. The trucks can be built. The infrastructure is going to take a little bit longer to get going.
This is Andrew. Let me jump on that too.
Yeah.
So I'll go quick, Deborah. Sorry. So we looked at this very deeply, and we basically found the math for a private behind-the-fence fueling station in the Midwest. We could make it cost. We can get cost parity with diesel fueling, but at that scale, we would need around 100 of these trucks operating at a single base. So we made the decision not to pursue that, and somewhat with hope that one of these hydrogen hubs that Rick mentioned would come online and we could find a better partnership that spread some of the the capacity, because the fixed cost of one of these fueling stations is very high. So for us to run one privately didn't quite make sense. So we are watching this infrastructure. Hopefully it rolls out into the Midwest so we can use it in the near future, and then we'll be very happy to put some hydrogen trucks in it.
Okay. Looking at the questions we've got. Electricity costs, retail rates of electricity been going up. Any thoughts there on how do you factor in electricity costs into those cost of ownership calculations? Anybody?
I'll be glad to tackle that from our point of view, Deborah. We of course we see that especially in California, and charging in peak times, the rates there are just ridiculous. So for us, it kind of goes back to a couple of different areas. One, we know there's going to be a special rate for commercial charging stations. We have not finished our main infrastructure, and we're dealing with SoCal Edison, so we're not exactly sure what that rate will be. We have a range of what that rate will look like, and we know there's not going to be any demand charges right out of the gate for us. So we did a very conservative model at what we believe will be a higher rate than we actually will end up receiving. And then the other piece of the electricity is that battery, management piece, and it's not just like plugging it in and understanding where your charge is at. It's like having a software system that can identify the truck schedule, and let's say a day shift driver comes in, he plugs a truck in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He doesn't need it to be ready till 3:30 a.m. the next morning. We want that charger to be smart enough to recognize that from, say, 5 to 10 during California peak time, we don't need that truck to charge because he's going to be charging at a rate high enough to be done without any charging happening during that time frame. So the charger management piece will be big. And then let's say it hits 10 o'clock at night and peak is over. Maybe we don't need to charge at 200 kilowatts. We can charge it at 40 kilowatts and still be ready for that 3:30 a.m. shift in the morning. So it's a very dynamic piece of the puzzle right now, but it's a very important piece to really minimize your electricity charges, especially as they do fluctuate in California and the rates that we're going to be seeing.
And Rick, what are you seeing with the NACSE fleets you've talked to? How are they evaluating that?
Well, the cost of electricity varies considerably depending on your relationship with your utility. It isn't a one price for everybody. So there's a number of flexible arrangements that can be made. There's also in California and the West Coast, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, you have low carbon fuel standard credits. So you're actually getting paid cash on an annual basis for using electric vehicles at your facility. Right. So, I don't know of any other arrangement where running a diesel where you get cash back on an annual basis. So there are lots of other variables in the total cost of ownership, and all of these fleets have figured out ways to make these operations pencil out properly so that they're in the black. And they're all finding that there are ways of getting a positive return on the investment.
And Andrew, basically, you have handled that by having your customers pay for the power.
Yeah, we have it that way. And you know, we're eating the cost of, for the most part, the higher cost of capital to acquire the trucks in the first place, right? We do build these trucks slightly differently in a diesel unit, but I'll tell you that we figured out a way to make this work without a crazy green premium for our customers. One of my customers shared with me that they had their analysts in math and doing the charger in the way that I described, where they bought the charger and they're paying for electricity. They're going to break even after 2 years rather than paying me fuel surcharge. And sure, yeah, electricity costs are changing. So are diesel prices, right? So does the fuel surcharge. So it's worked out so far. You know, granted, you know, as described, this is small scale operations. I'm not arguing that we're in a position to be able to switch to 1,000 battery electric trucks in exchange for 1,000 diesel trucks, but we do argue there are use cases where it makes sense, and we found a couple of those. I think there's a few more to find.
Brad, you'd mentioned earlier about having to have backup power because of problems with blackouts and brownouts in the electrical grid. Rick, most of your run-on-less fleets are in California. What are some things they're doing to in that eventuality?
Well, part of staying away from getting charged for peak power usage is having your own power on site. So one of the
Well, I think we perhaps have lost Rick. We are actually over our time, so I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. We are, again, my name's Deborah Lockridge. I am editor and associate publisher at Heavy Duty Trucking. I want to thank our panelists for their insights. I also want to thank our sponsors, Rush Truck Centers, Odyssey Battery, and Man and Hummel Fleet Direct. We have, if you missed parts 1 and 2 of this series, they are available on demand on our website. That is truckinginfo.com/webinars. And also, if you go there, you'll find we've got another webinar that I'm doing with some of our other fleet editors tomorrow, looking at the electric truck market from a broader perspective of all kinds of fleets, from company cars to vocational government buses and, of course, heavy-duty trucking. So thank you so much for attending this webinar on the road to zero emissions.